Week 4 is here, and we have a ton of injuries to go through. Adam, I forgot to count before we started going live, but is it 5 rookie quarterbacks we have starting today? That's fun. I don't think anybody expected that by week 4.
I think, and I mean, I'm a little biased. I don't know if you can tell from my gear here, but I think the most significant one's got to be Aiden O'Connell, right? Starting for the
Dude,
Raiders. Let's
I'm
go.
excited.
Boiler up.
Yeah. I mean, he looked great in the preseason, and you're throwing the ball to Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, and you got Josh Jacobs coming out of the backfield. There's reason to be excited about Aiden O'Connell, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I've got a few of these guys. DTR, I've got him as a top 20 running back or a top 20 quarterback this week with his rushing upside. AOC, I've got him ahead of some guys that are kind of spicy. Bryce Young, Desmond Ritter, of course, who is bombing right now on the game that you're probably watching on London. Derek Carr, who I'm a little bit concerned might not be able to finish the game. Ryan Tannehill, Zach Wilson. So if you're in a 2 quarterback or a super flex league and AOC's out there and you're hurting for a QB2, go ahead and pick him up. But let's run through some of these injuries here. First of all, let's start with the outs. In the early games, we have quite a few guys out. Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham with a hamstring and ankle injury. Neither of them will be playing. Irv Smith, Quez Watkins, probably not affecting too many fantasy lineups there. But Traylon Burks out with a knee injury. Adam, can you talk to us about this a little bit? He had that LCL sprain in the preseason. Now it's the same knee is keeping him out of this game. Obviously, that opens up some opportunities for Chigakonkwo, which we are very excited about. But is this something that's going to linger with Traylon Burks? How concerned should fantasy managers be even before these injury reports? Alfredo and I talked about him being a drop on Tuesday's show. Is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, I think for pretty much all the reasons you listed, this knee injury goes way back into Traylon Burke's college days.
Yep.
Something that he's kind of been dealing with, and it's become a little bit of a chronic issue. And then on top of that, I mean, the Titans' passing game offense is nothing to really get excited about. So when you weigh those two factors, yeah, I think it's full on Dropsville for Traylon Burks in your traditional redraft leagues.
So do you expect him to maybe be back next week, or could this be a multi-week absence? Do you have any insight into this, or just kind of taking it day by day at this point?
Yeah, it's tough to forecast. I mean, I personally thought when we got word that he had the LCL sprain earlier in the season that he was going to miss more time going into the season, and this might be a case where they've just kind of rushed him back, and now we're getting into going into NBA terms, some load management and
Yeah.
some game management things for Traylon Burke. So I think there's real possibility that he could play next week. It doesn't sound like he has a new injury. It just sounds like this is some aggravation of what he's been dealing with the preseason. Again, kind of a chronic issue for him on that left knee. So if you play in a deeper league, dynasty leagues, you just got to kind of take it day by day with Traylon.
All right, fair enough. The other out that we have from this early slate of games, kind of surprising. Deshaun Watson. Alfredo and I talked about this. We didn't see that he got hurt in the game last week. He finished the game, and then we saw this limited participation in practice throughout the week and just kind of shrugged and said, probably nothing serious here. Now all of a sudden he is out, and DTR is getting the start here. So do we expect this to be a multi-week absence from Deshaun Watson, or is he probably going to be back for week 5?
If I had to project right now, I would say back for week 5. I mean, in my injury column that I wrote for football guys, I actually projected Deshaun Watson to play. I thought this would come down to a pain management thing. We saw limited practice reps, but I wasn't really too worried about that because before these guys play on Sunday, they get injected with a lot of pain medication and things like that to help them get through the game. And I thought that was going to be the case for Deshaun Watson, just limit his reps during the week, get him feeling good before the game and play. It sounds like they saw enough that they weren't really confident in his ability to finish the game. But I think another week's rest. This sounds like we haven't gotten a whole lot of clarity on it. It sounds like it's a shoulder contusion where it just comes down to like a pain tolerance thing. And can you get through the game of throwing 30 to 35 times and the repetitiveness of that? I think he should be back in week 5, though.
All right, sounds good. We've also got Chase Claypool inactive, no injury, just doesn't like the coaching staff, and the coaching staff doesn't like him, and hasn't really been much of a factor so far in the passing game. So a healthy scratch there. We heard some murmurs last week that he might have been a healthy scratch, and then some unsavory comments towards the coaching staff officially kept him out of today's game. Officially active, according to Field Yates, this tweet just came out. Derek Carr is going to be playing. So let's talk about that a little bit, because there was some concern that he wasn't going to play. I don't get it. Alfredo and I, we joked about this on Friday's show. The Saints keep bringing Jameis Winston back on contracts, and Jameis Winston keeps signing contracts with the Saints, but they seemingly will do whatever they can to keep him from playing. I don't think many people expected Carr to be playing today, but he's active. He's getting the start. Are you looking at him as kind of that QB1, QB2 borderline play, or is he way down your rankings where you wouldn't feel comfortable starting him today?
Um, I think it would depend on my options and maybe who's on the waiver wire. For Derek Carr, I don't think it comes down to a performance thing, but I think it comes into can this guy finish the game, a re-injury risk thing. So when we're talking about AC joint sprains, especially on the throwing shoulder for the quarterback, all the injuries I've looked at that has the highest re-injury risk. So that means chances of getting injured and missing another game or extended time with the same injury. And him coming off that injury a week out, not missing any time. I think he has I wouldn't say necessarily a red flag, but a yellow flag as somebody that could play this game. And if he gets hit wrong, he gets tackled wrong, he gets sacked, lands on that shoulder again, might not be able to finish the game. So if you have other options and you want to be a little bit more conservative, I understand benching Derek Carr this week.
So one more question about Derek Carr, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering. We've got Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave are kind of the deep threats in this offense. Is there going to be any possibility that maybe he can't push the ball downfield, that we see more checkdowns to Alvin Kamara, more short throws to Michael Thomas, or when he's out there, should he just be playing like his normal self?
I mean, I think he should be playing like his normal self, but to my last point, if you're trying to avoid Derek Carr getting sacked and getting hit, I would think he's going to want to get the ball out quickly. So I would expect, especially early on the game, that Saints offense to try to put Derek Carr in a favorable position where he's not holding onto the ball too long and
Yep.
get into a position where he can get sacked like that. So I think this is, for Alvin Kamara coming off a suspension, this is a nice Alvin Kamara game. He should be heavily involved in both the running and passing game as well. But yeah, we'll have to see how the Saints draw it up.
Yep. High end RB2 for me this week. Should be a fun week for Alvin Kamara to get back acclimated into the NFL in the 2023 season. Now, in the late slate of games, we don't have anybody officially declared out besides Jimmy Garoppolo, who we talked about a little bit. Obviously, Aiden O'Connell showed that he can play in the preseason, but sometimes preseason success doesn't always translate into regular season success. So we'll kind of see how that works out. But if you got Devontae Adams, if you got Jacoby Myers, we've seen how funneled this passing tree is to those two. So I think you still start them unless you've got much, much better options. We've got a lot of guys unlikely to play, though. We got a word Tyler Higbee was dealing with an Achilles, but he is officially active, so he is going to be out there. We've also got word that Justice Hill and Miles Sanders are both going to be active as well. David Njoku, who dealt with a kind of bizarre story yesterday, burns on his face, and then showed up to the game today in a mask. They're all going to be active, but looking at some of these unlikely guys. Austin Eckler, looks like this could actually be a decent week for Josh Kelly. He might be able to bounce back there. I don't know if you've got any insight here, Adam. Austin Eckler, is he going to be back next week? I mean, I really don't know what to expect. We thought this was going to be like maybe a 1 week absence, and now here we are going into week 3, or well, his third week where he's missed a game.
So this is pretty standard for a high ankle sprain. These are really tough injuries for running backs. It's something that I've looked at personally a lot, and I deal with in my professional life, rehabbing, especially when we're in football season with high school and college players. But this was most likely going to be at least a 3-week injury for Austin Eckler. I think he has a decent chance to play next week because we saw him get some limited practice reps this week. But on average, NFL running backs miss 3.2 weeks with a high ankle sprain. So I think if you have Austin Eckler, continue to hold out hope. Week 5, I think I would, if you made me pick right now, I'm probably leaning 70-30 in the chance that Austin Eckler does play in week 5. And then if you're just a glutton for punishment, put Joshua Kelly in those fantasy football lineups this week.
Desperation's a stinky cologne, and a lot of us are desperate this week. Now, let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers real quickly, because they got a lot of people banged up. That was a huge injury report this week. Juwan Jennings, unlikely to play. Elijah Mitchell, unlikely to play. And then they're saying Deebo Samuel is probably going to play. They're expecting him to be out there, but dealing with ribs and a knee injury. He was unable to practice throughout the week outside of just getting some time in the weight room. Adam, you and I talked a little bit before we aired here, and I get concerned about Deebo Samuel, right? He's a guy who plays through injury often, and when he does, it seems like it impacts him pretty heavily. So you were able to pull some data here. Should we maybe be a little bit concerned about Deebo Samuel today?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there when we were talking pre-show. Talking about Debo Samuel tendencies. So when we go back all the way to 2019, look at Debo Samuel's injury history, and how he performed in the game following an injury. On average, we see a decrease in 30% of his fantasy football production. So I think moving into the back half of that wide receiver 2 range is a good place to be. He was heavily involved last week, but that was without Brandon Ayuk as well. So
Mhm.
I think when we take all these things into consideration, and then we look at, you know players coming off of rib injuries as well, we also see a pretty hefty decline, somewhere between the 14 to 20% mark in fantasy football production. So when you weigh all those options, um, obviously it's team dependent with redraft leagues. If you drafted Debo Samuel, you drafted him high, but this is an instance, maybe DFS, we're fading him. Or if we have somebody that has a really healthy bench, I might be pivoting in someone else besides Debo Samuel.
Yep, completely agree there. Now I'm looking right now. We just got the Broncos official injury report out. I'm looking for Jerry Judy's name. Um, Still doesn't say. I guess this is a yeah. Fantasy Pros just tweeted out the injury report, but it doesn't say anything on here. Just a blank spot next to the name. It says everybody else is active or out, and we still, 13 minutes after injury reports should have come out, have no news on Jerry Judy. So if anybody in the chat sees that, I think we expect him to play. I don't think there's any
Yeah,
expectation that he won't be out there, but would like to
correct.
get an active stamp before we go ahead and talk about him. Last guy I want to talk about that I think is fantasy relevant here. Well, we could talk about Saquon Barkley, but sounds like that's going to be a game time decision. So good luck if you've got Saquon Barkley. But let's talk about Marquise Brown dealing with a thumb injury, playing later this afternoon. Are we expecting him to play? It doesn't seem like it's going to keep him out, but have you seen anything that I haven't, Adam?
No, I think if the afternoon games are always tough, but I anticipate Marquise Brown playing with a thumb injury. Typically, that shouldn't be something that limits players too much, unless he was dealing with some type of fracture, which I think we would have heard about or learned a
Right.
little bit more about. So I think he should be good to go.
And then the last one I will talk about here, completely forgot about him, but Miles Sanders, ready to go, dealing with a groin injury, logged some limited practices throughout the week. I think this is just what we're going to see, man. They're giving Miles Sanders a pretty heavy workload. I think we're just going to see him banged up and playing through it most of the season. Any concerns about Miles Sanders, or should he be close to a full go as we'd expect?
So with Miles Sanders, this is an injury that's going back to the preseason. I mean, he's dealing
Yeah,
with this groin injury all the way back to preseason. Soft tissue injuries, they tend to linger, and this to be expected in terms of limited practice reps. I'm looking at his snap share here the first 3 weeks. It's hovering around the 60% mark. I would I would probably expect it to stay around that mark, if not go a little bit lower. This might be Chuba Hubbard get a little bit more involved to try to lighten the
yeah.
workload with Miles Sanders. So just something to keep in mind. I think it caps his ceiling for sure.
Cool. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to do about 15 minutes of start sit questions here and then try to catch the
Let's
end of this game in London. First question here. Morning, fellas. I've been waiting to deploy Gabe Davis. Is today the day against the Finns? But I'd have to sit either Lockett or Higgins. I'm starting Tyler Lockett and T. Higgins. Gabe Davis is a great guy as a wide receiver 3 or a flex, but I don't think you're plugging him over either of those two guys. Right, Adam?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Need one running back, waiting on Eckler with Brees Hall, or wait on Eckler with Brees Hall. Oh, yeah, Eckler's not going to be playing today. I mean, a doubtful designation. I'm sure you've got the numbers here, Adam. If somebody is doubtful, I mean, I feel like that's basically out at this point. I don't think I've ever seen anybody suit up with a doubtful tag, do they?
Correct. So going back to 2017, 94% of players listed as doubtful did not play. Fun fact, of that small sample, 2 times Mike Evans, listed as doubtful, ended up playing. So Mike Evans is the exception to the rule. Everyone else, you're not playing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured, but glad you were able to confirm that here. Thanks for all the content, guys. I need help 2 quarterback PPR league. I need 2 running backs and 2 flexes. So between Kyron Williams, James Cooks, Joe Mixon, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, and Tyler Lockett. I think Kyron and James Cook and Mixon are probably the obvious ones here. All those guys are like top 15 running backs right now. So Adam, between Flowers, Addison, Tank Dell, and Lockett, who do you prefer?
We're picking one of those. That's
Just
a
just one.
yeah, that's a tough one.
Unless you'd prefer Kyron, James Cook, or Mixon over one of these guys, but I think those are kind of
No.
the three that separate themselves from the pack a bit.
I'm gonna defer to your rankings here a little bit. I mean, Zay Flowers is not. He's got a tough matchup, but he should be really the only passing weapon. Both Rashad Bateman and Odell
Yeah.
Beckham are out. The way Tank Dell's been playing in that Houston offense, I know that's another tough matchup with Pittsburgh, but it'd be hard to bench Tank Dell, and then Tyler Lockett's so reliable. I'm going to defer, not to put you on the spot, defer to
No,
your rankings here
that's
to
what I'm here for.
see
Yeah.
where,
I got Lockett as my wide receiver 17 on the week, a little bit more bullish than most, but I do have him a few spots ahead of Zay Flowers at wide receiver 22. Tank Dell's a little bit further down the list, like what we've seen so far, but it's hard to move him up into that wide receiver 2 tier yet. So I prefer Tyler Lockett slightly to Zay Jones, but you make a good point with no Rashad Bateman and no Odell Beckham Jr. This could be a huge Zay Flowers week. I am expecting those targets to go a little bit more Mark Andrews' way. We haven't really seen Mark Andrews putting it together so far this season outside of one game, but Mark Andrews is my tight end too. I think with no Bateman, no Odell, we see a big week from Mark Andrews here, and Zay Flowers continues to do what Zay Flowers has been doing. Next question here from Logan. With the news of Watson out, what 3 running backs do I start? This is a good point. I think with Deshaun Watson out, we do see a heavier dose of Jerome Ford. I moved him up my rankings a few spots here. So Jerome Ford, Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, or Swift. If we need 3 here, I'm benching Najee out of the 3.
fair. Yep.
And then what 2 wide receivers between Amari Cooper, who also takes a ding here. I mean, we've seen Deshaun Watson hasn't looked great, but he has at least been force feeding Amari Cooper. I moved every single pass catcher down a little bit. I think DTR is a fine streamer because of his rushing upside, over 1,200 rushing yards in his final 2 years. But I don't think that he's going to be airing it out quite the same way we've seen with Watson. So between Amari Cooper, Michael Thomas, Tank Dell, and Kendrick Bourne, here I'm going with, I'm still going with Amari Cooper, but I think you got to temper expectations a little bit. And then Mike Thomas. Would you think about maybe playing Tank Dell over Mike Thomas this week?
Not over Michael Thomas. I mean, I don't want to galaxy brain this too much, but to your point, I mean, Deshaun Watson looked decent last week, and when that offense was moving, he was having Amari Cooper heavily involved. I know there's a lot of excitement about Dorian Thompson Robinson. I am of the mindset that I would kind of wait and see on that and see how that offense looks. So I think I would be going Michael Thomas and Tank Dell. I'm having a really hard time benching Tank Dell if I have Tank Dell right now. I know it was like one big play, but he's been heavily involved, and
He's
CJ
gonna
Stroud
get
has
more
looked
big plays.
amazing. Yeah, and this offense has looked really good. So I don't want to overthink it, but I would be leaning Michael Thomas, Tank Dell.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 21 targets through the first 3 weeks, which is pretty solid, especially for a rookie coming out. And I've got, I mean, I'm looking right now. It's close for me. I have Michael Thomas at wide receiver 37 and Tank Dell at wide receiver 38. So literally back to back in my rankings. Can't really go wrong with either of those guys. What's up, guys? Kyron, Zach Moss, and a chain need 2 in PPR. I think I'm probably going to sit Achan here. I'm still saying a chain. I got to get that right. It's Achan.
Chan, yeah.
I think that's who I'm benching out of the 3. Looked really good last week, but we got to look at the context there. It was against the Denver Broncos. They were up 50 points at one point, and, they were just a beaten team. And really to start the game, Raheem Mostert was the RB1 there. So I do like Achan this week, and I've got him a little bit higher than most, but I don't think you could start him ahead of Kyron Williams or Zach Moss yet, right?
Yeah, it's tough though. It's tough. It's after you see him drop 50. I mean, yeah, it's hard to put that guy on your bench, but I think you got some solid options here that you could probably justify it.
And it's tough. I mean, we don't know. We're really shooting in the dark here, whether it's going to be Mostert or Achan starting out the game. It could go either way. Achan looked great, but Mostert has been tied with McDaniels for years, and he really likes him, and he's going to continue feeding him. So tough decision there, but I am going with Kyron and Zach Moss. Geno Smith or Daniel Jones on Monday. I have Daniel Jones 2 spots ahead in my ranking. So close here. Geno, I hate to say it, hasn't really looked too good this year. And Daniel Jones has been up or down, but I will take the insulation of the rushing upside for a better projection on the week. So I'm going Daniel Jones here. I see you nodding along. Anything to add here, Adam?
Nope, that's perfect.
All righty. Pick 3 in PPR: Zach Moss, Jerome Ford, Amari Cooper, Brandon Ayuk, Cortland Sutton, Chris Godwin, or George Pickens. Ooh, those are a lot of good options there. Zach Moss, I mean, am I overstating it by saying Zach Moss is a must start? I mean, he is getting so many touches. He's looking great with the touches. Let me pull up my rankings and see where I've got him this week. He's my RB10 on the week. Got him ahead of Miles Sanders, ahead of Joe Mixon, ahead of Kyron Williams, ahead of DeAndre Swift. I mean, that's pretty darn close to a must start with the workload they've been feeding him and how good he's looked behind this offensive line. I think he's the obvious answer. Um, Brandon Ayuk could see more work with Debo out. Cortland Sutton is another guy that, right now Jalen Johnson isn't playing. Eddie Jackson's injured. Jaquan Brisker is injured. I mean, that secondary in Chicago is beat up. So I've got Sutton as a top 18 wide receiver this week.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna give people a little piece of advice. I mean, I know you're a Bears fan. I live in the Chicagoland area. My dad lives in the Chicagoland area. My dad's actually at the game, and my dad dropping some sound fantasy football advice after watching the Bears last week. He said, "Whoever the Bears play, you play those fantasy players because the Bears are so awful. You have to play anyone that's playing the Bears." So if you want some advice from Papa Hutch, that's what he's saying. He's going to be definitely putting Cortland Sutton in that lineup.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. So Zach Moss and Cortland Sutton are the obvious ones for me. And then I think I go with Jerome Ford, just expecting them to skew a little bit run heavy. Adam, I don't know if you're watching the game right now, but huge play from the Atlanta Falcons tight end here. Catch and run for about 50 yards. And wouldn't you know it, it's Jonnu Smith, not Kyle Pitts.
Oh my God. I was waiting for that. I noticed when you said Falcons tight end, I said
Falcons
it can't
tight
be
end.
good.
So here they are.
It can't be good.
At the 13-yard line, Bijan nowhere on the field, and Algier getting stuffed in the backfield. Arthur Smith, man, doing Arthur Smith
Gotta
things.
love it.
Need to start 3 out of Alvin Kamara, Zay Flowers, Achan, Madison, and Tank Dell in full PPR. Kamara, I think it's pretty tough. I mean, if you drafted Kamara, this is what you drafted him for, to plug him back into your lineup in week 4. So I think Kamara's the obvious one here. Madison, that's another tough one, man. I'm a little lower on Madison this week, and I've steamed Cam Akers up in my rankings, which could end up making me look very foolish by later this afternoon. But it seems like the writing's on the wall that they want to start reeling back this volume for Madison. So I'm going to go with Zay Flowers, but I do have Madison ahead of Achan. So Kamara, Flowers, and Madison for me, but I'm not feeling too good about starting Madison this week.
Yeah, I mean, we might see some more Cam Akers. I don't know if it's enough that Cam Akers becomes fantasy football relevant, but it might be enough that it starts eating into Alexander Madison's workload. So that might be one I'm trying to stay away from just because there's a lot of uncertainty in that backfield.
And I just wrote an article about this. So often we look at the depth chart and we say, well, there's no guy behind the lead running back, so he's going to maintain his workload. There doesn't always need to be a guy on the depth chart. It can just kind of touches get fanned out over a bunch of guys, and then all of a sudden this guy that you thought was the RB1 on the team is suddenly irrelevant. And Mike Davis was one of the examples I used. You looked at the depth chart back in 2021 and you said, well, Mike Davis got an 85% opportunity share in week 1, and he got 21 touches and 5 targets, and there's nobody else on the depth chart. And then out of nowhere, Cordero Patterson breaks out in year 9, and then undrafted rookie Quadre Allison starts getting touches, and then all of a sudden they sign Wayne Gallman off the streets, and from week 7 onward, Mike Davis didn't see double-digit touches more than once. We also saw it last year in Miami, where Chase Edmonds was not looking good, and we said, well, who's going to step up in his place? And then Raheem Mostert suddenly stays healthy, takes on a huge workload. The team trades for Jeff Wilson midseason, and then all of a sudden we see Patrick Laird getting in the mix, and we see I can't even remember who else. I mean, it's Salvin Ahmed. Like, guys just start popping up out of nowhere. So there doesn't always have to be a guy, and that's kind of my concern with Madison. I don't think Cam Akers is going to be a 20 touch per game guy, but Cam Akers is there, Ty Chandler's there, Myles Gaskin gets elevated from the practice squad, and then all of a sudden there's not enough left for Madison to be fantasy relevant. Got another question here. Pick 2 PPR between Mostert, Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams, and Dameon Pierce. I'm going to defer to your dad again. I think you got to start. The guy's playing against the Bears. The Bears' run defense has not been good. Javonte Williams was Jeff Hasley's running back start of the week, and I've got him pretty high in my rankings. So I'm going Javonte Williams here. Sorry, I was just watching. Drake London pushed out the back of the end zone and just missed what could have been a very nice contested catch. Ritter threw it up there and he got pushed out back. Javonte Williams is the obvious start for me. And then I'm kind of torn between Mostert and Miles Sanders. Do you have a take on these? Let me pull up my rankings and look here.
I don't have a strong take except the Miami offense is a lot better than the Carolina offense. So I'd really have a hard time if I had anybody in the Miami offense. Well, I shouldn't say anybody. Like I'm not playing Durham Smythe, but like Raheem Mostert, Devon Achon, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. I mean that the offense is just so much fun to watch. I'd be
Yeah.
probably playing the Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, and that's where I'm looking now in my rankings. That's how I've got it as well. Raheem Mostert is my RB9. Miles Sanders is my RB11. So in that really really fun, exciting Zach Moss tier. How about it? Pick 1.5 PPR looking for stability over crazy upside. Elijah Moore, Isaiah Pacheco, Jalen Warren, Kenny Gainwell. Got some bad news for you, Joe. I don't know if you're getting stability with any of these four, but
Yeah.
I think Pacheco is probably the guy if you're just looking for, you know, nothing's guaranteed in fantasy football, but if you're looking for 5, 6, 7 points, I think you can get that from Pacheco. Elijah Moore scares me this week. We talked about it with Amari Cooper as well. Elijah Moore falls outside of my top 50 wide receivers, which means he's basically non-startable with DTR under center.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think between these three running backs, you got guys that are in a timeshare, which 80% of the league is at right now. Those workhorse running backs are kind of becoming a thing of the past. So um all of them in pretty good spots. But I agree with your point, Pacheco. And who's most likely to score a touchdown? I think that could be Isaiah Pacheco as well.
The guy on a good team. And I think
Yeah.
we've also looked the last couple of weeks, Isaiah Pacheco has been a little bit disappointing, but he's been dealing with a hamstring injury for back-to-back weeks leading up to he was questionable coming into the games. He is completely off the injury report, full participant in practice throughout the week. So we'd expect to see that hopefully grow a little bit going into this week, right, Adam? Hopefully.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And his hamstring injury was like a hamstring contusion, which is another part of just
Ooh.
like it's really painful. It doesn't feel good. So it sounds like 2 weeks out now. He's healed up and like you said, off the injury report. So should be feeling good and hopefully playing well.
Got another question here in PPR, Achan or Ford. Man, I'm recommending a lot of people bench Achan today, and that was after recommending a lot of people started him last week, where I was feeling a little bit good about those recommendations. But I really hope I don't feel bad for recommending all of these benches this week. But I'm going Jerome Ford in what is probably going to be a pretty run heavy scheme this week without Deshaun Watson. I see you nodding along, Jerome Ford over Achan.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Alrighty. Jacoby Myers with Aiden O'Connell throwing the ball, which changes things up a little bit.
That's
Jerry Judy, who has dealt with an injury for the majority of the week, or would you start any of them over Achan? I think I'm still going Jacoby Myers here. Am I sipping the AOC Kool-Aid a little bit too hard, Adam?
No, I will say, I mean, Aiden O'Connell, especially in the preseason, looked really good, but he's been good his entire college career about
Yeah.
getting the best players the ball. Like he
Hmm.
doesn't really spread it around. You saw it in college with Rondell Moore, David Bell,
Yep.
last year with Charlie
Yep.
Jones. He features one guy. So I think you see a pass funnel to Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, and you don't see it really grow outside of that. So I think Jacoby Myers actually has a really nice floor in this game.
Yeah, I this kind of blew my mind. He's pulling a 32% target share this year, which is ninth best in the NFL, behind Devontae Adams. I mean, it is
Hmm.
like 90 something percent of the touches in Las Vegas are going to either Josh Jacobs, Jacoby Myers, or Devontae Adams. That's what you want in fantasy football, are these hyper funneled offenses. Let's answer one more here before we log off, Adam. This comes from Andy and Renee Nelson. Good morning, Zach Moss, Gus Edwards, Tyler Lockett, or Tank Dell in the flex in full PPR. Zach Moss. Zach Moss start. Is that do we got a nickname for him? I mean, you just got to keep starting Zach Moss. Well, you can.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're Zach Moss stands on this show.
All right. I think we got one more here. Alfredo. Oh, start two. Dave Kluge, Adam Hutchison, or Alfredo Brown. Sorry, Alfredo. You just got Wally pipped, buddy. You're out of a job. Hate to
Yeah, I
see
don't
it.
see it. I don't see him on the show here. Do you? Where is Alfredo? I think we got to sit him. I think we got to
Yeah,
sit him this week.
take a seat, Alfredo. Sorry to hear it, man. Enjoy. I will be doing the show this evening. We'll be doing the show tomorrow with Joey Wright. And sorry, bud, you got Wally pipped. Maybe we'll see you again. Maybe we won't. Just kidding. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. We will be back later this evening on audio only on the podcast version. I'll be doing the injury report later this evening. Tomorrow, I'll be back with waivers with Joey Wright. And then on Tuesday, our good friend Alfredo Brown will be back on the show as we will be discussing some tiers and rankings on Tuesday. So, should be a fun one with Daniel Harms. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you soon.
See ya.